to A Livelihood, New Adventures as We Age. Today I'm going to introduce you to Karen Koenig. Karen and I are old friends from a long time ago. We actually met when we were working out at a local gym. And Karen has gone through a number of transformations that she's going to want to tell you about. So welcome to you. This is wonderful to be on your show. I'm delighted. I'm so pleased we got you up here from Florida. So you and I knew each other a long time ago, I think when you were an educator. Mm-hmm. Still. Yeah. Yeah. And then you went back to graduate school and you became a psychotherapist, right? A social work psychotherapist. First, I got a master's in education, and then I realized if I was going to do serious counseling, then I went back for an MSW. Yeah. And you developed a private practice here in the Boston area. Yep. I had a thriving practice for a long time and loved it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think, as you've told me, Karen, you always had a yen for writing, correct? And some time ago you were writing screenplays. Well, yes, unproduced ones, but I did write 5 or 6 of them, and when I'm finished the eating books that I'm writing now, I really hope to return to working on my screenplays because they were just so much fun. When did you actually start writing, would you say? I left a full-time job in the early 90s, or mid-90s, to develop a private practice and to write. And I wrote a couple fair novels, and then I got into writing screenplays, and they were a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. But it's very hard to really get them produced. And so then I started to write about what I know, which is psychotherapy and the field of eating disorders. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you got involved in the field of eating disorders? What was compelling about that for you? Well, what was most compelling was that for much of my life I had my own struggles with food. I was either dieting or I was overeating and binge eating. So, what did you call yourself, a world-class binge eater? Yeah, I was, right up there. I could have entered the Olympics, even though I'm tiny, and I did weigh more then, but I could put away an apple pie, a dozen donuts at a time. I just had really, even if I had a sense of when I was full, I overate. And, in part that was because I was always dieting and restricting. So I went through my own metamorphosis with eating and transformation through therapy and reading books about how to eat according to my appetite, and worked through my own problems, and then sort of that melded with my interest in being a therapist, and so I attracted clients who were also struggling with these issues, and so I'm able to, quite successfully treat binge eating disorder, chronic dieting. So let me ask you this: did you, I know for people that I've worked with who've had or let's say a dysregulated relationship with food, there's a good deal of shame involved in some of the behaviors, especially binge eating or certainly bulimic kinds of behaviors, right? So did you go through a period where you really struggled with yourself about whether you should come out publicly as having been a dysregulated eater? I don't think I ever really struggled with it. It was so much who I was. I was never, I can't say I was never a secret eater, but I remember I had a friend in college that we would binge together. How do you explain your being able to become a normal eater? The same way I felt about smoking and why I was able to quit smoking. I mean, I quit twice for 2 years and then resumed. But every time I took a cigarette, I thought to myself, this is killing me. It really became very uncomfortable behavior for me. And the same thing with eating. I as a therapist friend of mine says about her former addictions, she said, I knew I was never meant to be this way. I teach a non-diet approach. I don't encourage people to
count calories or count fat grams. Or it's not an external, it's an internal process of learning when you're hungry, what you want to eat, paying a lot of attention while you're eating, and then stopping when you're full and satisfied. And anybody can learn this.
So how come so many people go on diets?
Well, because diets are pushed in this culture, and we like the quick fix. We are a very external culture. If someone says it's a good idea, we go along with it rather than say to ourselves, "Well, does this feel right? Does this work?" But there's also something. People who have overeating problems, they don't have a lot of other passions. That is their main passion. A lot of the work I do is encouraging people to find other things that make them feel as good as eating.
So you know that I've always been so struck with how you have put out one book right after the other and gotten a major publisher and go around talking about your books, and that's what you're doing now here with me. So let us talk about your books. What was the first book about?
The first book is called The Rules of Normal Eating, and it's published by Gers Books, which is an eating disorders publisher, very dear and wonderful people. And it just sets out the rules. Eat when you're hungry, choose foods that satisfy you, eat with awareness and with an eye towards pleasure, and stop when you're full or satisfied.
And then the next book is...
Well, I realized that people were stuck. They weren't able to use the rules consistently because of emotions.
Right.
And so I wrote a book called The Food and Feelings Workbook, which is all about why we have feelings. And as I always say as an aside, you mean they're not just there to plague us and make us miserable. They're our inner guides. And I take 7 feelings that are difficult for dysregulated eaters. And then the third book is what every therapist needs to know about treating eating and weight issues. Actually, W.W. Norton Books came to me and asked if I could write a book for therapists, not on the severe end of eating disorders, anorexia, severe bulimia, but if you're a general practitioner, what do you need to know? What do you need to look for? What are the approaches you can use? And then the fourth book, Nice Girls Finish Fat, Put Yourself First and Change Your Eating Forever.
I love that title when you first told me that. And
Everybody
you're the one
chuckles.
who created the title.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I was actually at a trauma workshop just doodling, and I came up with that, and I was delighted with the title. And Simon & Schuster is the publisher, Fireside Books, so I loved working with them. And after I wrote What Every Therapist Needs to Know, I started to think about, why else are people getting stuck? And I have mostly women clients, and I thought, these are just the nicest bunch of women I ever met. And if you ask them about themselves, tell me about yourself, they'll say, well, I'm really nice. And I started to see this theme of niceness. And
would you say they're caretakers?
Well, yeah, very caring, nice to everyone else, and then they treat themselves with food. So the book is written in a sort of sassy tone, and there's a Nice Girls test in it, which people like to take. And
people usually come out with a high score.
Yeah, some do. Some do. I'll get an email from someone. My sister and I took it, and I'm nice, and she isn't. So some people have eating issues, but it's not about being too nice. But I get emails from people and calls from people, and they say, oh, I read this book. I thought you were writing about me. I thought you've been watching me my whole life. So what I do is help people learn the skills they need to add to niceness. You don't want to take away niceness, but you want to know when you want to take care of yourself rather than the other person.
Karen, we are at the end of our time here.
Well, this was delightful. I had a good time.
I appreciate your doing this for me.